The boardroom was already tense when my slide froze on the screen, the risk matrix glowing red where it shouldn't. I hadn't named the partner yet. I didn't need to. Anyone who had read the appendix knew what red meant here, lawful on paper, prohibited in practice, the kind of relationship that passes checks until it doesn't. Logan Mercer broke the quiet first. He leaned back, glanced at his father at the head of the table, then laughed. Loud, easy, performative. We're not running a museum of worst-case scenarios. A few executives shifted. No one smiled. Thomas Mercer, founder and CEO, watched his son without comment. That silence was the real decision. In this company, when Thomas said nothing, Logan heard yes. I kept my voice level. I explained the indirect exposure, the shell routing, the timing risk. I explained what happens when regulators connect dots after the fact. I explained why warnings exist. Logan waved me off. This slows us down. He said, override it. Before continuing, I want to be clear. The following story includes fictionalized details and AI-assisted narration, created to highlight real-world leadership and accountability lessons. If stories like this don't feel right for you today, it's perfectly okay to pause, get some rest, and take care of your well-being. I was the senior risk and compliance lead. I wasn't there to win applause or sell confidence. My victories never made slides. They lived in records, controls, and disasters that never happened. Today, that role felt small. The system requires an owner, I said. Logan smiled again. Assign it to me. Around the table. Eyes dropped. Thomas remained still. Father and son, aligned by omission. I turned to the console. The warning blinked. Patient and precise, I followed protocol, selected override, confirmed classification, and entered the decision owner. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I pressed submit. And record. The room exhaled, satisfied. While I felt the weight settle, tight and burning, exactly where consequences are born and recorded forever inside systems. How are you feeling right now? Calm? Uneasy? Or somewhere in between, if the tension is building? Take a moment to breathe slowly and evenly, just letting the rhythm settle your thoughts. Tell me where you're listening from. And if this story resonates, consider subscribing so we can keep going together. Because what happened next wasn't loud, but it was irreversible. The email arrived the next morning, polite in structure and poisonous in tone. Logan Mercer didn't raise his voice this time. He didn't need to. He copied half the leadership team and labeled my warning career fear thinking. The kind of phrase that sounds clever until it becomes evidence. I read it once, then again, letting the words settle without reacting. I had learned long ago that silence, when chosen carefully, was not weakness. As the days passed, the warning refused to disappear. It surfaced in side conversations, in forwarded threads, in quiet pauses when numbers were discussed too quickly. I remembered another pause years earlier, when a different deal had looked flawless until I traced a single approval chain. That audit trail had saved the company hundreds of millions in penalties and months of regulatory scrutiny. No announcement followed, no bonus, just a closed file and a crisis that never happened. Thomas Mercer knew that story. He had thanked me then, privately, now. When his son dismissed my work, Thomas avoided the topic altogether. He scheduled meetings without me, approved timelines I wasn't asked to review, and smiled through presentations that leaned heavily on optimism. Favoring blood over facts was easier than admitting risk existed at all. By the second week, my calendar told the truth before anyone did. Strategy meetings vanished. My access shifted to read-only. Decisions moved faster, louder, and further away from my desk. I wasn't fired. I was edited out. Still, I documented everything, every override, every ignored note, every timestamp. The system didn't care about tone or politics. It only cared about sequence. One afternoon, while reviewing logs, a confirmation banner appeared at the bottom of the screen. Clean, unemotional, permanent, decision owner Logan Mercer. I stared at it longer than necessary. The warning was no longer mine. It never really had been. It belonged to the record now, anchored to a name that wasn't mine, waiting patiently for the moment when memory would fail, but systems would not. That was when I understood patience wasn't passive, it was preparation under pressure. For what followed. When I stopped arguing, the room didn't notice at first. Meetings continued. Decisions moved forward. And my quiet was interpreted exactly as Logan Mercer wanted. To him, silence meant surrender. I still showed up when required. I nodded at timelines. I answered questions when asked. What I stopped doing was volunteering warnings. No follow-up emails, no raised eyebrows, no careful language meant to soften inconvenient truths. I had learned that advice only mattered to people willing to hear it. Logan mistook restraint for retreat. He grew louder, faster, more confident. In one meeting, he leaned forward and said, "We're done overthinking this. Execution starts now." Heads nodded. Someone praised the speed. I wrote nothing. I recorded everything. The partnership accelerated. Contracts cleared in days instead of weeks. Risk reviews were waived in the name of efficiency. When a junior analyst asked if compliance needed another look, Logan cut him off. "We've already cleared that." He said, "It wasn't malicious. It was convenient." I watched the system accept each shortcut without protest. That was its role. Systems don't argue, they record. My calendar filled again, not with strategy, but with implementation briefings. I listened. I measured timelines against thresholds. I compared routing paths against past cases I remembered too well. Every calculation led to the same conclusion, but conclusions no longer needed a voice. One afternoon, an automated process ran quietly in the background, triggered by volume and velocity. Not judgment. No alerts were sent. No meetings were called. A single internal audit flag activated the kind designed to surface later. When external eyes began asking questions, I didn't celebrate. I didn't warn anyone. I adjusted my workflow and waited. Years in risk had taught me that outcomes change fastest when nothing appears to change at all. Logan wanted momentum. I gave him space. He wanted speed. I removed friction. Each unchecked step increased exposure, not dramatically, but measurably, until the margin for error narrowed beyond repair. No one noticed. Logan was already talking about press coverage. Thomas was praising momentum. I closed my laptop and left on time, carrying only calm certainty. Silence had done its work not as weakness, but as placement. The record was clean. The system was counting. All that remained was time. If you were me at this moment, what would you do? Leave a comment below. The first sign arrived quietly, wrapped in professional language and a polite subject line. A relationship manager from our primary banking partner requested a routine compliance refresh, citing internal thresholds and timing reviews. Nothing accusatory, but doors like this didn't knock unless something upstream had already shifted. Logan reacted the way he always did when friction appeared. He slammed his palm on the conference table and called it bureaucratic panic. "This is what happens when systems get scared of their own shadows," he said. "Tell them to stand down." The room nodded, relieved to have a villain that wasn't us. Thomas listened, said nothing, and let his son fill the silence with certainty. I was asked to respond by end of day. I didn't offer reassurance or speculation. I replied with documents. Clean summaries, risk classifications, transaction maps, prior notices attached without commentary. Facts travel better when they aren't dressed as opinions. Logan skimmed the files and scoffed. "Paper noise," he said, forwarding them without reading. The following week, the requests multiplied. Clarifications, confirmations, historical context. Each message arrived calm and precise, each one narrowing the distance between inquiry and action. Logan grew sharper with every call. He blamed outdated rules, overcautious lenders, and what he called compliance theater when he demanded to know why this was happening now. No one answered directly. I kept my responses brief and documented. See attached, as previously recorded. Per decision log, the system mirrored the same discipline. Timestamps aligned. Ownership remained clear. Nothing contradicted anything else. That consistency was its own warning, though no one named it. Then, late on a Thursday afternoon, the tone changed. Not dramatic, just final. The bank informed us that outgoing transfers tied to the partnership would be temporarily paused pending review. No accusations, no deadlines, just a pause. Logan stared at the message like it was a personal insult. They can't do this, he said, but they had, and they did. I closed the file and noted the time. The first door hadn't slammed. It had closed gently, without sound, leaving everyone inside still arguing about who had touched the handle. Beyond the boardroom, a clock had started, indifferent to confidence and pride, measuring consequences in silence. The question didn't arrive with anger. It arrived with precision. During the emergency board call, one director finally asked what everyone had avoided: who approved the partnership under these conditions? The line went quiet. Faces hardened. This was no longer about momentum or confidence. It was about ownership. Logan answered immediately. I did, he said, strategically and intentionally. His voice was steady, almost proud. He spoke about speed, opportunity, and calculated risk, framing the decision as leadership under pressure. For a moment, it worked. A few heads nodded. The room eased. Then someone asked for the record. Not opinions, not explanations. The record. I was asked to share the audit log. I didn't summarize or contextualize. I projected it exactly as it existed. Timestamps, classifications, decision paths, every warning issued, every response recorded, every override confirmed. The system spoke in neutral language, untouched by confidence. Logan leaned forward. That proves I owned it, he said. The chair scrolled. There it was. A high-severity warning. A regulatory exposure note. Logan's dismissal logged as efficiency. The override authorization. And beneath it, the acknowledgement trail: who saw it, who dismissed it, who chose not to intervene. No one spoke. Thomas shifted slowly in his seat, staring at the screen longer than anyone else. The system wasn't accusing anyone. It was simply remembering. Logan's confidence cracked. That's not the full context, he said. We were under pressure. The words fell flat. Context asks for discretion. Records do not. A director cleared his throat. Another asked whether similar overrides existed elsewhere. The conversation moved past Logan, past emotion, into process review, exposure modeling, and fiduciary duty. That was when the air changed. This wasn't collapse. It was exposure quiet, methodical, irreversible. I could feel the organization recalibrating in real time. Not emotionally, but procedurally. Once awakened. Risk committees don't sleep again. The meeting adjourned without decisions. None were needed. The log had already done its work. I closed my laptop knowing something fundamental had shifted. Responsibility was no longer abstract. It was visible, and visibility is the one thing power cannot outrun. Don't leave, yet the next part is where everything starts to shift. Thomas Mercer had spent decades mastering composure, but that morning it fractured in small, visible ways. He interrupted speakers mid-sentence. He reread emails he had already approved when outside counsel joined the call early. He didn't acknowledge them at first. He was staring at the audit summary as if it had personally betrayed him. Call the lawyers, now. The words cut through the room, sharp and unsteady. No one questioned the order. The shift was immediate. This was no longer a business problem. It was a liability problem. And Thomas understood the difference too late. The legal team wasted no time. They didn't ask how anyone felt. Their first question was procedural and devastatingly simple. Who had prior knowledge of the risk before approval? Silence followed. Not strategic. Exposed. Thomas looked to Logan instinctively, like a father reaching for familiarity. Logan spoke quickly, framing urgency, market pressure, competitive windows. He sounded convincing until the attorneys asked for documentation, not explanations. Documentation. I shared the records without commentary. Logs don't soften truths. They present them. Screens filled with timestamps, acknowledgements, decision paths, every warning, every response, every override. The legal lead leaned closer. This indicates awareness, she said. Repeated awareness? That's not what it means. Logan insisted. Those were hypotheticals. They were recorded risks, she replied evenly. Thomas's breathing changed shorter, shallower. When he finally spoke, the authority was gone. Is there any way to contain this? The answer came without comfort. Exposure could be managed, not erased. Responsibility reassigned, not denied. Insurance would ask questions. Regulators would follow paper, not intent. Then the confirmation summary appeared. Clean, final, decision ownership, review acknowledgements, escalation paths. Logan Mercer's name anchored every critical moment. No one said it aloud, but everyone understood. This wasn't about blame anymore. It was about survival. Thomas closed his eyes briefly, then nodded once. Fear stripped of options. The collapse wouldn't be loud. It would be procedural, precise, and permanent, and it had already begun. The pushback came fast and loud. Logan stormed through meetings as if volume could rewrite records, pointing at me whenever his explanations thinned. She buried us in fear, he repeated, hoping blame might harden into fact. I stayed still, answering only when addressed. Arguing now would only feed the spectacle. Emails followed, then calls, then a demand to clean up the logs. He said it casually, like housekeeping. I answered plainly, logs were immutable. He laughed, sharp and brittle. Everything's editable. He said, I didn't correct him. Systems don't argue, they enforce. He tried anyway. Access requests spiked. Admin tickets multiplied. Each attempt failed quietly, recorded with timestamps that stacked like receipts. Panic always leaves a trail when it meets rules that don't bend. Thomas pulled me aside once, away from the glass and the eyes. His voice was low, pleading in a way power never sounds when it's secure. Help me steady this, he said. I offered process, not protection. I explained what could be contained and what could not. He nodded slowly, in that pause. It landed he could influence people, not records, and records were now in charge. Logan doubled down publicly. This is on Skylar. He snapped on one call. She engineered the risk narrative. I let it pass. When truth is documented, rebuttal is unnecessary. Being blamed is unpleasant. Being blamed while right is exhausting. Still, restraint mattered. The board moved without ceremony. Calendars shifted. A meeting appeared labeled Executive Review, then changed to Confidential. Names filled the invite list. Logan's did not. He noticed late, pacing the hall, phone pressed to his ear, voice cracking. No one answered. Do you recognize that moment? When everything changed quietly? If you do, subscribe. This isn't the last story. Nothing happened the way people expected. There were no escorts, no cardboard boxes, no announcements. The hallway stayed quiet. Desks stayed occupied. Titles remained in email signatures. If you weren't watching closely, it looked like the crisis had passed. It hadn't. It had only changed form. The shift arrived as a carefully worded email sent early, designed to prevent panic while ensuring compliance. It announced a restructuring of approval authority, effective immediately. Certain decisions now required additional review. Certain escalations bypassed familiar routes. No names were mentioned, no reasons given. Logan read it twice. I saw him. He still had his title Strategy Director, the same office, the same parking spot. What he no longer had was momentum. His approvals didn't finalize deals. His signatures didn't close loops. Everything he touched paused, waiting for someone else. That kind of power loss doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself slowly in unanswered messages and meetings that continue without you. Logan tried to push through at first, acting as if nothing had changed. The system corrected him quietly every time. Requests rerouted. Access restricted. Decisions reassigned. He wasn't removed. He was contained. Thomas said nothing publicly. Privately. He looked older. The confidence that once filled rooms now stayed low. Careful not to trip over procedure. He understood what had happened. The board hadn't punished his son. They had neutralized risk. I received no email, no acknowledgement, no praise. My role didn't expand or shrink. I remained where I was, with the same responsibilities and the same silence. That confirmed the outcome. Systems reward stability, not victory. People adjusted. They learned which approvals mattered. They stopped copying Logan on critical threads. They scheduled around him, not through him. Authority, once invisible, now revealed itself by absence from my desk. I watched the organization recalibrate. No anger, no satisfaction, just recognition. This was control in its real form, not force, but permission. The exile was quiet, which made it permanent. Logan still arrived each morning in the same tailored suit, still nodded to reception, still joined meetings that no longer waited for him. His calendar stayed full, but none of the invitations required his signature. Decisions flowed past him like water finding a new channel. I watched without gloating. Justice, when it works, doesn't raise its voice. Logan sent follow-ups that went unanswered. He offered approvals no one requested. When he did sign something, the system returned it for secondary review, automatic and unapologetic. Power hadn't been taken. It had been rerouted. Thomas saw it clearly now. The strain showed in his pauses, in the way his eyes followed conversations he no longer controlled. This was the cost he couldn't negotiate. Not money, not reputation. Watching his son occupy a role stripped of consequence. In leadership, removal is loud. Irrelevance is surgical. I kept doing my work. Same hours, same discipline. No congratulations came. And that was right. I hadn't won anything. The system had corrected an imbalance. That distinction mattered. It was governance, not revenge. Then a call came late one afternoon from an unfamiliar number. The voice was calm, precise. "We've reviewed your background," she said. "Not your titles, your decisions." She asked one question that stopped me. "What would you need in order to stay?" No one had asked me that before. I didn't answer immediately. I looked at the records, the quiet machinery that had done its work without permission. The satisfaction wasn't personal. It was structural. The process had held. I declined politely. Justice didn't need my presence to continue here. It had already settled in. As I left, I passed Logan in the hallway. He smiled, thin and practiced. I returned it, brief and neutral. The exile wasn't from the building. It was from influence, and everyone understood that now. I went home calm, not relieved, aligned. The measure of justice isn't noise or punishment, but alignment where actions meet records, and consequences arrive quietly, on time, exactly where responsibility belongs. Leaving didn't feel dramatic. It felt finished. I packed my desk early. Before the office filled with voices and assumptions, no farewell emails, no explanations, I returned my badge, closed the final ticket, and walked out with the same posture I'd kept throughout. Calm isn't something you find at the end. It's something you practice until it becomes default. Logan's name no longer appeared where decisions lived. He still existed, technically, but influence has a geography, and his coordinates were gone. Meetings moved forward, approvals rerouted. Authority doesn't announce its departure, it simply stops responding. That silence followed me out. Not heavy, just settled. Thomas didn't try to stop me. When we crossed paths, he nodded once, an acknowledgement stripped of pride or defense. I understood it. He'd learned the cost of mistaking proximity for competence, a lesson paid in structure, not apology. Outside, the air felt different, not lighter, honest. I thought about everything that hadn't happened because the system held. No headlines, no speeches, no public reckoning. Justice doesn't need an audience when it's built into process. What mattered most was never proving anyone wrong. Being right is fragile. It depends on memory, mood, and power. Records don't. They endure. They don't argue, they wait. It was never about being right. It was about being recorded. That truth let me leave without anger. The work was done, the balance restored. What stayed with me wasn't anger or triumph, but a quiet truth system's reward consistency, not volume. Being right matters less than being recorded. And dignity comes from aligning actions with values. Then letting time work. I didn't need revenge to move on, just clarity and balance. I'm curious. Where are you listening from right now if this story resonated? Leave a comment and share the moment that stayed with you. A like or share helps more people find stories like this. And if you'd like to keep going together, consider subscribing. We'll continue calmly, honestly, one story at a time.